Today we're going to be looking at the two most famous Fender offsets and answering the question, what are the big differences? Let's get it. Me and Ray here, we've had our fair share of time on the Guitar shop floor, helping all you lovely folk out there finding your dream guitars, your dream amps, your dream pedals, and genuinely all good things guitars. But I think you'll agree with me, man, that one of the questions that we get quite a lot, or we did get quite a lot, is what are the big differences between the kind of two main Fender offsets?
Yes.
One being the Jazzmaster,
and the other being the Jaguar.
which we've obviously got in our laps right now, because on first inspection,
Superficially, very similar.
these guys are looking pretty similar. And if you've seen our walls that are very, very nicely merchandised with all the stunning guitars, at first glance, they're probably going to look, really, really similar. But I think you'll agree with me, man. There's a lot of differences that actually go into these guitars.
More so than meets the eye to begin with. So today, that's why we're going to briefly hop and skip right the way through those significant differences so that you know which one to check out for.
So what we're going to be looking at is kind of the main differences, them being like the sounds, the pickups, scale length, really, really important there as well, and we'll touch on that when we get to it. And then, of course, all the other parts. So if you do want to see any of those specific parts for just the answers that you need, you can check out the timeline below. And, of course, the links in the description will take you to our websites to check out these guitars and check out all the rest of the offsets that we offer. But I think let's just dive in with the most important thing, and that's probably the pickups, man, right?
Well, you say pickups, I reckon it's the circuits. But let's go with the pickups first. Yeah,
They both like are working the same way. So, let's maybe start with the Jaguar that's in your lap right
Okay,
now.
I've got the Jaguar, and you can tell that because basically big pickup, small pickup. That's the easiest way. Or this has more chrome, so it means more polishing, okay?
More futuristic as well.
More futuristic, yeah. The Jaguar, this one is a few years more recent. It was a kind of upgrade. It was supposed to be the most expensive Fender at the time, and that's why you see loads of features. The pickups are ostensibly similar to what you'd find on a Strat, but there's a specific difference. And as you can see, they're inside a little kind of like a claw, like a metal claw.
Yeah, it's almost like just like a little housing for them.
Yeah, like a kind of sort of a cage. And that's not just for coolness' sake, even though I think it does increase that somewhat. It's almost like a kind of Faraday. It's meant to have an inductance so that you've got less hiss, less noise, which anybody who plays Fender or any single coil guitars will realise that is part of an issue. So that was their way of dealing with that. And it also produces a slightly different sound anyway. So any guitar with a Jaguar pickup in it, you're going to hear that.
So speaking of sounds, why don't we get a little bit of a sound example out of these? Because I always believe that Jaguar's got like a very, very specific tone out of it.
Yes, specific collection of tones perhaps. And part of it is the circuit that we'll be talking about soon. But right now, I'll give you the neck pickup of the Jaguar. Or maybe I'll just switch across and then we'll talk about the circuit later.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Okay, neck pickup for the Jaguar. And now, on into the lead circuits. This will be the other most used Jaguar tone. Very distinctive.
Very distinctive. Like that was immediately like the sound of a million records there, and it's kind of got that like. See if you ever hear like Fender twang. Like
twang, surf tunes, spy movies,
now,
like that.
You'll probably agree as well that that's like quite a thin sound, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like
no,
it's distinct.
Decision. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, obviously, we saw you messing around with a couple of the buttons on it, and that's another question when it comes to like the pickups and it comes to the circuits on a Jaguar and a Jazzmaster. What the hell do all those buttons do?
Okay. This is the bit that's going to either make a lot of sense for you or it's just going to make it more complicated. So each of these guitars has a lead circuit and a rhythm circuit. And the thing that throws people is that not every control will work on each of the circuits. So I started off with the warmer sound, and that was the rhythm circuit. This is the switch right here. That's the lead in the rhythm selector. So up for rhythm. And what that does is it disables everything down here. We'll do nothing at all.
Yep. Down, you're at the bottom. Up, you're up the top. It's an easy way to remember.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a rhythm circuit. In addition to that, what you should know is when you're in rhythm, you're getting this pickup only, not this one at all. And on top of that, you're getting a certain filter on the sound. You can use these guys, volume and tone, and they're rollers. Let me demonstrate. So. That was the volume, and for the tone. So you can get all kinds of different combinations of those two. That's the rhythm circuit. Press this one down and you're in the lead circuit. Now, those two do nothing. You have full control over both pickups. And what's happening here, volume and tone as you'd expect, pickup selector for each pickup. So it just is as you would see it. So this one for the neck pickup, this one for the bridge, which I've got selected, and then this one, I'll tell you about in a second. So we've got, in fact, let me just do this. Nothing, okay?
We get that quite a lot as well, as like obviously people will be playing like a Jaguar and then not know that they're like technically your pickup selections, which is kind of like, it's an on and off switch essentially. And
You've
they're like,
unselected yourself.
why have I not got any sound happening? And it's
This is
obviously,
broken,
you need to activate it.
Right, so let's activate them. So everything's off. Now I have this pickup. Okay, now I have this pickup. Now I have both of them. So what was that third one? We call it in industry the strangle switch. It's a high-pass filter. So for those of you who don't know what a high-pass filter is, a high-pass filter only lets high frequencies through. It will cut off everything that's at a certain point that deems to be low frequencies. So let me have the bridge pickup on. Now let me try that with the other pickup. So there you have it. That's the strangle switch. It can be very useful. It can be quite tough to take depending on how you set your sound up.
And especially, obviously, if you're playing live or anything like that, that could be a bit fiddly, obviously, when you're playing. Which, I guess, moving on to the Jazzmaster here, you've already so eloquently covered what the rhythm and the lead circuit does.
Which is the same for the Jazzmaster.
Exactly the same on this. We have our rollers, it only goes to the neck pickup there, and it completely bypasses everything down the bottom here. Whereas with the difference with the Jazzmaster, and this is something to kind of like clear up quite early on, these aren't P90s. That's what a lot of folk will think because they are those in those kind of bigger soapbox sort of like housings. They're still very Fender single coil. They're in a big house, essentially. But it has that sort of distinctive sort of thinness that you were getting off of the Jaguar with this one difference, and we'll get onto that as I'm playing here. So it's got all the plethora of sounds that we were expecting on the Jaguar there as well, but of course it's got a three-way selector switch as opposed to the buttons and the on-off switch that the Jaguar has got. Now, obviously the name of the Jazzmaster, you don't see a lot of people playing actually jazz on this, but originally that
was the plan.
Yep, that like rhythm sort of setting on it. You can get all those like real nice like warm sort of. And you know that's me playing jazz because it's a 251, of course. But you see a lot of people maybe not using them, but that's one of the kind of beauty I find with these is that they're so like multifaceted in what you can do. They're great studio guitars. You can get an absolute ton of sounds out of them. So the sounds and the pickups are the kind of main factor that I would certainly say to anyone in the shop that is kind of the big difference. There's one other massive difference in it, probably a couple of inches in it. But we're talking scale length here, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, very quickly, the distance from the nut of the guitar to the distance of, to the bridge, sorry, the distance of that there. So what a lot of people don't understand, certainly, you know, when it comes to scale length, is actually what it's going to affect. But we'll give you just the raw numbers right now of it. The Jazzmaster is a 25.5-inch scale length, which is exactly the same as a Stratocaster, is exactly the same as a Telecaster, whereas the Jaguar
is a little bit less. In fact, it's 24 inches, which doesn't sound like much until you play one. It changes the position where your left hand sits. It changes the relationship to where the pickups are on the body. It gives you an entirely different playing experience. It changes the tension of the strings if you're in standard tuning. And that, to me, as someone who's demoed the guitars and sold them to people, is the most divisive thing about the Jazzmaster and the Jaguar. Certainly if you started learning on a Strat type of guitar, as a lot of us do, this is going to be immediately more recognisable to you, and this is going to feel quite strange and quite other. This is less than a Les Paul. You know, we talk about the Gibson scale length and Fender scale length. This is Fender scale length. Gibson is 24 3/4, and this is 24, so it's less again. But to me,
it's a very drastic difference
it really
in feel. Like
it really is.
Again, it may not seem like that much on paper, but you know, when you actually get them in your hands, completely different.
That doesn't mean bad. A lot of people prefer it for that reason. You get a really slinky sound, you get really easy action. And this kind of guitar, I think, promotes a lot of creative playing, which is why I really enjoy the Jaguar, and that's part of it.
Yeah, so to put that into kind of like, what does that mean for you? Bending's going to be easier on a Jaguar with a standard set of strings, but what you might find is that it feels too loose. So what you'll find is maybe a lot of guitarists will maybe put 10s, even 11s on a Jaguar, whereas on a Jazzmaster, it's going to feel pretty much the same as like a Strat and Tele, exactly like Ray said. And despite what people may think, the Jazzmaster isn't a longer guitar, it's just a bigger body, really, and you'll kind of understand that when you get it in your lap.
Yes, now, talking about the size of the guitars, you might think these are both the same size, but of course, yeah, and they are similar. Let's do a little... But see, apart from that scale length we just mentioned, there is actually a difference in the bodies. And it's not as simple as all that, because Fender have actually changed the size of the Jaguar over the years. But let's talk about kind of the classic, you know, the late 50s, early 60s. They were almost identical, but not quite. And you'll notice in this corner here, ever so slightly different. Ever so slightly redrawn. Remember, the Jaguar came 3 or 4 years later, and it was supposed to be a reimagining of the surf kind of guitar style. And so, yeah, they're not exactly the same at all, but Fender do change the goalposts from time to time. So it depends on which example you go for. And we were talking earlier about both of these, weren't we? We've chosen deliberately vintage style Fender reissues to show you today, because all of the idiosyncrasies are most obvious on those guitars.
Yes.
Fender, being Fender and understanding their market really well, offer variety of different offsets, you know, right up to, you know, Jim Root plays a Jazzmaster, and it ain't like that one.
It might look like this a little bit, but it's been like stripped away. It's got active pickups in it.
Aye.
Which I guess like that just carries on the ethos of Fender, that they are an incredibly modular company, which, you know, you will find, if you like the shape, then you're probably going to find something that does suit your playing style.
Yes, yeah, and so it does mean that they have readdressed certain things over the years, including contour. I mean, even the Strat has been a few different shapes over the years. That's a whole different subject. But for these offsets, yeah, there is a tiny bit of difference in the shape. And
on the topic of kind of modular stuff as well, there is a couple of things with particular vintage-inspired like Jaguars and Jazzmasters, because they are kind of going for that more like golden age of it. And that's kind of not to do with like the bridge. It's not. I've given myself away there. It is to do with the bridge. I was going to say it wasn't to do with pickups and whatnot. On these kind of more vintage-inspired Jazzmasters, Jaguars, they have these vintage-inspired bridges. Now, if you're playing your kind of, you know, nice, like, just kind of chill sort of like, I was going to go kind of...
Oh, I like that.
That was like a country version of Miserloo there.
That was, yeah.
But
I don't know what to call it.
That is going to be totally fine. You're absolutely, you know, sorted. But if you are going to be playing it in any sort of aggression to it, which I think a lot of players maybe these days are going to be doing, which you can find that the strings will actually slip off those saddles. Now, it's exactly the same with the old style Jaguars, but with these being, again, as we mentioned, modular kind of guitars, you can get ones that have got tunomatics on them. You can get ones that have got Mustang bridges on them, which is a far superior bridge. But it's completely up to yourself. You'll find the right thing for you.
Yes, and that's maybe part of making it your own. And don't forget, a lot of people, we were talking about, people coming to these guitars, a lot of you might be coming from the American indie scene and like Sonic Youth and those kind of people who were guitar manglers, and they were the people who would hit so hard and use the bar to make the strings come out. They were always using the modular nature to change things in and out and all that. It's part of being an offset guitarist. Is you take the guitar that has so much vibe and then you make it yours, and that's why they're so cool.
They are so cool. So I think Ray will agree that's probably like the main points that certainly I would, and maybe himself would, pass on to customers, just in terms of they were asking, what's the difference between these two guitars? Because like obviously there's going to be feel differences just depending on the kind of music you kind of play, depends on the kind of style you like, and of course that scale length is really, really going to play into it. But I think they're a lot similar than, maybe people can, give them kind of credit for. Like, despite the sounds being very different, I think they're both they're playing from the same playbook, I would say.
There's like a house style to the two of them.
Yeah.
And I would say to you, if you are interested in Fender Offset, I would advise playing an example of each, and you'll understand, hopefully from watching this video and getting the lowdown on them both, you will have a preference for one over the other. Maybe you just love them both, and hey, that's okay as well.
You can have as many offsets as you want.
Right. For example, from personal experience, I prefer a 25.5 scale length, but I prefer the Jaguar over the Jazzmaster for all the tonal options it gives me and the sound. It's so unlike the other guitars that I have.
Yeah, because like we didn't really touch on that a little bit in the sound section as well, but the way that I look into Jazzmaster is that your bridges, your kind of stratty sound, your middles, like your middle Telecaster sound, and then that neck's quite unique in itself to a Jazzmaster. Whereas like, that sounds like a Jaguar to me.
Yep.
A Mustang, maybe you'll get there, but like that sits in a division on its own.
It's unmistakable.
If you want something that's a bit more of a workhorse, that's probably what I'd recommend to folk. But of course, you don't need to be like, Sonic Youth, Dinosaurs Jr., all that sort of stuff into, your kind of scrappy punk and everything like that. These can handle probably any kind of music, but if you are also into just your experimental shoegaze and whatnot, then you're going to have a good time. And of course, speaking of sounds, Ray, can you do my favourite sound on a Jaguar? I'm going to set up all the right tones that you need.
Sort me out with a hot sound there, Kieran, please. You ready for a bit of a glide guitar?
Now, as soon as you figure out which one you want, we'll teach you how to do that later down the line. But hopefully this cleared up what the differences are between the Jaguar and the Jazzmaster. Now, obviously, if you have any other questions or anything, leave them down in the comments. We will get back to you on that because we love talking about offsets.
We really do.
All honesty. But I want to just thank Ray for joining me in the studio today to cover this topic, and hopefully it was clear enough for you. While you're down there asking your questions about the offsets, give us a like, give us a subscribe, because you can keep up with all the latest news at Guitar HQ. Until next time, I've been Kieran.
I've been Ray.
And we have just been looking at the differences between the Fender Jazzmaster and the Fender Jaguar. Have a great day.
Cheers.